You can find this podcast and others at Gun Rights Radio Network, gunrightsradio.com. Podcasting freedom.
Hello and welcome to episode 47 of Shooting the Breeze, the formal gun podcast of WaltInPA.com. I am Walt White, and it is pretty early in the morning. It's about 5:30 right now, and you know, I don't know, I kind of find it amusing that while I'm sitting here at 5:30 in the morning, smoking a cigar, drinking a cup of coffee, recording a podcast, the vast majority of you are still sleeping. I guess, you know, the early risers will probably get up between now and about 6 a.m. And, you know, the people that get up a little bit later, probably between 7 and 8, you know, the 9 to 5ers kind of, you know, the kind of folk. But, you know, here I am starting the day bright and early. I actually got up about an hour ago, got all situated and ready, and wanted to get the podcast recorded while it was still fairly cool. The last couple of weeks have just been hot, like abusively hot. Over the weekend, I shot a USPSA match, and when I got in my car at the end of the day, I turned on the car and I have a temperature readout, and it read 109. It's the hottest day that I can remember, and you know, here I am running around shooting in it. It's kind of crazy, and I had second thoughts after I sweated for 7 hours at the range, but it's been really warm around here, and in order to make this podcast a little more comfortable, especially for you, the people watching the video feed, I thought it would just be easier if I recorded in the morning while it was much cooler. I'm in a semi-finished portion of an unfinished basement, and part of my basement is above ground. I just happen to be in the portion that is above ground. The wall back and to my left is an exterior wall, and most of the day the sun beats on this wall. Because this room is insulated from the rest of the basement, throughout the course of the day while the sun beats on the wall, even through the insulation, it still gets warm in here. And then add the warm room to hot halogen lights, which I actually learned a little bit about, that we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. But it gets really hot in here, and it can just become a sweaty mess if I'm sitting here trying to record the podcast and the room's, you know, 90 degrees. So if I do the recording first thing in the morning, it's actually quite comfortable. It's a little warm, but I'll deal with it. Mostly it's because of the lights. And speaking of the lights, I got a direct message from Tom on Twitter from Fill Your Hands, and he suggested switching over to fluorescents, you know, to cool the room down a little bit. Because this portion of the basement was unfinished, I have a very low ceiling height, so I can't put fixtures in the ceiling. I guess I could if I put them between the ceiling, or between the floor joists for the room above, and I guess maybe cut out the insulation or wrap the insulation around an inset fixture. I just didn't want to go that route. I wanted all the insulation I could get to keep this room and my cigar smoke separate from the rest of the house. And I was looking at options for the fixtures that I have, because I don't have ceiling height. I have sort of like wall sconces. They're fixtures. They stick in the wall, and they have sort of like 3 adjustable heads on them, and each of the heads have a halogen insert in them. I think they're 50-watt halogen bulbs, and you know, you kind of point them around the room, kind of like floodlights. That's one of the reasons why I picked them, so that I can point one at me from directly above, and then there's one behind the camera that points at me, and it illuminates me well enough. I mean, it's still not quite bright enough as far as the camera is concerned, but you know, it kind of gets the job done. So I was looking at ways that I could maybe replace the lights. The actual bulb was way too small to stick a compact fluorescent in there, so the other option was LED. And I've got 6 fixtures. An LED replacement bulb was $25, so $120 or $150 to replace all the light bulbs in this room, which is only 6. I'll deal with the heat. That's $150 for light bulbs. It's incredible. But at any rate, it is early in the morning, and I'm kind of in good spirits. I've got my cigar, my coffee, and I'm ready to go. It wouldn't be a podcast if I wasn't reminding you about the contest that I'm running on WaltInPA.com. This month I've made it really, really simple. Lots of choices to enter for entering. I'm going to start ramping up the difficulty. I would love to see lots and lots of entries this month. You should be able to get in over 20 entries still by the time you see this podcast if you're listening to it fairly early. Basically what I'm doing is asking you what you did in guns today. So you head over to WaltInPA.com, you click on the Shoot Your Guide to Shooting and Competition contest post, and in the comment section you tell me what you did in shooting today. That is your freebie. You only get one. You can tell me what you did in shooting. The following day you may tell me what you did in shooting today. Well, actually you can tell me, but you also have to show me. I want to see pictures, I want to see videos, and then you can do that for each subsequent day in the month. So theoretically, if you've had a really, really busy month in firearms, you could fill out the month with an entry every single day and really increase your odds in winning that signed copy of Shoot Your Guide to Shooting and Competition. My goal is to kind of push well past 100 entries, which I would love to see. But it's amazing how few entries you get when you try to give free stuff away. But in any case, we're going to increase the difficulty next month. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do, but it's going to get harder and harder and harder, and I'm sure the entries are going to drop off. So this month I would really love to see lots and lots of entries to make up for the lack of entries that I'm sure I'm going to see in later months as I increase the difficulty. I think that is all I've got in my show notes for this sort of pre-everything banter session. So let's get rolling with the news. The first item up in the news this week is entitled NCIS Props Turned Out by Oak Ridge Leatherworker from KnoxNews.com. Goes on to say, a goth lunchbox carried by actress Paulie Purnett, the Abby character in NCIS, may have screamed Hollywood, but it actually came from the workshop of an Oak Ridge leatherworker. Dennis Batterina, who runs Dragon Leatherworks, made the eye-catching bag in just 16 hours after getting the specs from the CBS prop master. He didn't have much to go on. It had to be black, red, chrome, and cylindrical. Fortunately, Batterina's wife, I'm going to butcher this guy's name and I apologize, Rebecca, a big NCIS fan, had an idea. She suggested the fleur-de-lis design because Perrette is originally from Louisiana, and the character she plays is Catholic, and I'm probably pronouncing Perrette wrong as well. P-E-R-R-E-T-T-E, if she's from Louisiana. I'm sure that I'm saying that wrong. But at any rate, the bag made 2 brief appearances in Playing with Fire episode on May 1st, so brief, in fact, that Batterina missed it when he watched the show. But sure enough, it was there. Once I saw it, with the actress holding it, it was a thrill, he said. While the goth lunchbox got the most airtime, it was his custom holsters and his wife's tenacity that secured him the NCIS gig. Rebecca once worked as an administrative assistant in the executive office of Ivana Trump at the Plaza Hotel in New York, and she's very, very good on the phone, he said. She started calling the studios of different TV police dramas to see if they were interested in trying out Batterina's holsters. My philosophy is you can't get in if you don't ask, Rebecca said. They can always say no, that's all right. She kept getting the operator and getting sent the voicemail, Batterina said. At CBS, however, she got off the phone. She got the number of the production house for NCIS, and the prop master happened to pick up the phone. It was sheer dumb luck. Still, once Rebecca got connected with Mike Cunningham, the prop master, she had to make a good pitch, and it was this: how are you fitted for holsters? Rebecca, who admires her husband's gorgeous work, was looking for TV characters who wear nice things. She had in mind NCIS character Special Agent Anthony Denuzio. It's way too early to be pronouncing these names. But Denuzio? I don't know. Apologize, I'm butchering him. At any rate, a ladies' man. He spends a lot of his money on clothes, his hair, his shoes. He likes to look good. A really nice holster was something he might want to wear. She said Cunningham had a pleasant conversation and he was very receptive. He took down her information and said he would contact her if anything came up. Sure enough, within 2 weeks, the first request came in, but not for Denozo. Instead, NCIS needed a leather holster that could lie flat under the slightly snug blouse of one actress, which was a cinch for Batterina because he makes holsters called flatjacks that do exactly that. Next came the request for the lunchbox. The final request was for a special shoulder holster for actress Corte de Pablo that fit under a bolero-style top. The holster had to hide the gun under her armpit, Batterina said. I came up with a specialized rig for her. It was pretty neat. A longtime hunter and gun enthusiast, Batterina started making holsters when he lived in New York because he couldn't find one that fit his requirements. Dragon's Leatherworks is a side business. He works full-time as a database analysis for SAIC, a local defense contractor. Before moving to Oak Ridge, getting orders from the South, it wasn't there, he said. Once I made the announcement I was moving to Tennessee, the orders quadrupled. For Batterina, it's gratifying to make sales in the state I'm living in. For more information about Batterina's work, go to the website Dragon Leatherworks. So, pretty interesting stuff. You know, it's really nice to see someone, you know, that's making custom holsters and doing it what seems like a real bang up job at it. Go on to, you know, doing stuff for TV, which is kind of cool. It you know, means more exposure, and I believe I remember seeing something along the lines of this particular lunchbox that he made. There's going to be a special run on them. I think there's something like 600, and you know, limited availability. Once they're done, and you know, there's special ordering instructions. I think you can do all that through Dragon Leatherworks, and I'm not quite sure where I remembered seeing that particular write-up. I don't remember whether it was on Walls of the City or if it was on Weird World, but you know, one of those sites had something on the, you know, the special lunchbox that they've got going on. Basically, it's just a copy of what was on the show, and it's, you know, it's for fans and kind of things like that. So, pretty interesting stuff. Well, I guess there is one drawback to doing these podcasts early in the morning, and that is I get really frustrated when I start tripping up over names like that. And you know, I was in a really good mood up until then. So let's try to keep the show rolling, keep my spirits high, so that you know, we finish this off on a happy tone. I'm not so happy after you read this, or after I read this next one, but you kind of get the idea. The next news item comes from NewYorkDailyNews.com, and it goes on to say Bloomberg says court really blew it. Mayor Bloomberg laid into an appeals court Wednesday for overturning 2 stop-and-frisk gun busts, saying the decisions were wrong on what's good for America. The Appellate Division on Tuesday threw out a weapons case against a 14-year-old identified as Joaquin M., caught with a gun and ammo in his backpack 2 years ago. The ruling came a week after the same court sided with another 14-year-old Darrell C., who was caught with a gun during a stop-and-frisk. The judges said the stop-and-frisks were illegal, which Bloomberg called mind-boggling. The police officers did everything they were supposed to do exactly by the book, he said. The kid had a gun, the cops saved people's lives by getting the gun off the street. And to overturn the conviction, I think, is just plain wrong. He struck a partially patriotic note in denouncing the twin rulings. It's wrong on the facts. It's wrong on what's good for America, he said. The city is appealing. In each case, the teen went on to be arrested for other crimes, one of them for attempted murder. And that's it. It's kind of short and sweet. And you know what's mind-boggling? Some of the stuff that's in this article. For one, let's see if I can find that quote really quick. Basically, he says that by turning aside the one kid, that they've virtually just kind of like approved murder or something along those lines. The cops saved lives by getting that gun off the street. I mean, it's like that movie with Tom Cruise where they had the people floating in the water, and they could see the future, and then they would tell Tom Cruise, and he would run off and arrest them before the crime actually happened. I mean, I think you've got the same thing in this situation with Bloomberg. How does he or anyone else know what would have happened with that gun in the backpack? I think it's a stretch to say that gun would have committed a murder. Maybe that gun would have committed a robbery. Maybe that gun would have been used to threaten someone, to be, pointed at them, various other things. But you can't say for sure, and to just blurt out, oh, this, because that gun's not off the street, we're eventually we're killing people. Not saying that directly, but in so many words, he kind of is. And the whole stop and frisk thing, they did everything by the book. It's perfectly legal. I'm strongly in disagreement with that whole thing. Someone walking down the street being profiled and stopped and frisked is not American, and it is not right. I don't really care what anyone says. I really detest that idea. I hate the thought of me walking down the street and being stopped and searched just because some New York City police officer felt that I should be stopped and frisked. I mean, he might as well ask for my papers while he's at it. But that's it. Short and sweet news item number 2 on, kind of a loony Bloomberg. The final piece of news comes from abcnews.com, and it's primarily a video, but there is a write-up that goes along with it. It is entitled, "Mom Stops Son from Robbing Store." Now, there's a little bit of confusion here. I saw this particular news story at some point, and the words fake were included. I don't know whether this whole... I don't know whether the whole incident itself was staged or what the case may be, but I thought it was kind of interesting regardless. It goes on to say, a Mississippi man is in timeout at the Rankin County Jail after his mother foiled his attempt to rob a convenience store, police said. Ray Mitchell, 22, of Flowood, Mississippi, faces one charge of attempted armed robbery after he tried to hold up a clerk with a gun, which was later revealed to be fake. The gun was fake, while paying for a bag of Dorito chips. So maybe, I don't know, maybe the whole confusion came in with the actual gun. It was a toy gun. But at any case, his mom, who had followed her son into the store to do some shopping, quickly intervened. The incident, which occurred Tuesday morning on Dee's One Stop Food Mart in Brandon, Mississippi, was captured on surveillance video. The mother sees the commotion, grabs the gun out of her boy's hand, and pushes him out of the store. Chris Butts, assistant police chief in Brandon, told abcnews.com. The alleged attempt thief's mother, Sharon Mitchell, told the clerk she was sorry, said her son was just playing, and implored the clerk not to call the police. After the pair left the store, the shocked employee called police, who located the mother and son near Palachetti? Wow. Here we are with the names again. In the future, I need to pick news stories. If I'm going to do the podcast in the morning, I need to pick really dumbed down news stories with names like Joe Smith and, states like New York. It's just so much easier to pronounce. Mitchell was arrested and taken to jail, where he's being held on a $300,000 bond. Adding, police recovered a black plastic pistol from the car. But said he views Mitchell's mother deserves credit for how she handled the situation. I kind of feel for her. She's somewhat of a little hero, he said. If the clerk had a gun, it would have been real messy. It's kind of an interesting... This whole thing is... It's kind of amusing. I mean, it's not that the guy tried to rob the store, but the whole course of events is kind of amusing. There's a still shot of the actual gun pointing. I don't know what this gun is supposed to look like, or it's a toy gun, so I guess it's not essentially modeled after one particular model, but it's fairly small. It looks something like envision, if you're listening to the audio portion of this, envision something like a Kel-Tec PM or PF9, smaller pocket-ish size gun, black, again, kind of small. He's pointing the gun at the clerk sideways. So, he's got the gangster point, the gangster vibe. Actually, he's got the gun turned so much that it's almost upside down. But he's holding the gun so low that his index finger, he's got the gun, he's got his hand wrapped around the gun. His index finger is pushed up against the bottom of the trigger guard. So his finger's not even in the trigger guard. And it just looks foolish, like like he's got 2 fingers on the frame of the gun, the rest of his hand is hanging off in space, and he's pointing this gun kind of sideways and almost upside down at the store clerk. Granted, it's still robbery. It looks stupid, but it's still robbery, and the guy got what he deserved. You know, he's being arrested. He's being held on $300,000 bond. It is what it is. You know, it is really cool that the mother intervened. I mean, you know, you see so many news stories and situations pop up where, you know, bad parenting leads to certain things, you know, robberies or assaults, or, you know, just generally delinquent kids, or, you know, delinquent is a bad term. It doesn't even fit here, but I don't know, just nasty little children sometimes. And, you know, in this situation, it looks like, you know, the mother's, you know, one step from cracking the kid on the back of the head, telling him, get out of the store, stop being a dummy. And, you know, she gets him out of the store, they get away. She does her best to try to get the clerk to understand that, you know, it was some kind of sort of twisted joke, and, you know, don't call police. It's not a big deal. They call police anyway. Kid gets arrested. He gets what he deserved. If the clerk would have pulled out a gun and shot this guy, I can't say that I would have blamed him one bit. I've said it before. A gun being pointed at you in this situation, how is anyone supposed to know whether it's real or fake? And why should anyone take that risk? If you're a store clerk and you've got a gun under the counter and you've got someone pointing a gun at you, regardless of how stupid it looks, you know, finger underneath the trigger guard, thing twisted upside down, you know, you do what you got to do. If you feel as though you have to draw a gun and shoot him, do what you got to do. And again, I'm not the judge and jury that you're going to have to face when you do that. But as far as I'm concerned, you were justified in doing so, again, in this situation. So, kind of amusing. I'm just getting a kick out of looking at the still, this guy pointing the gun at the clerk, the way he is. Featured content this week is a little light. I've got 2 pieces for you. About half an hour ago there was only one, and I almost ran with it, but I started digging around and came up with a second piece to talk about. It's not that the gun blogs haven't been busy lately. There's been a lot of posts, a lot of really interesting stuff, but a lot of it is heavy on politics, and I don't really do politics. I don't want to get into it on the podcast. So I'm looking for stuff other than what I've been seeing a lot of as of late. And I was having some real trouble, you know, tracking down some stuff that I thought was really interesting and I wanted to talk about on the show. One of the things that I saw, which I found most interesting over the past week, was episode 80 of the Power Factor show. Now, this is Rick and Steve talking about becoming a range officer in USPSA. Episode 80 is entitled The USPSA Range Officer Part 1. The Part 1 runs about, I don't know, 35 minutes, something like that. And it just happens that I think yesterday I saw Part 2 was posted. I haven't gotten a chance to watch it yet, but, you know, probably talk about Part 2 next week. But at any rate, the guys discuss, you know, what is involved in becoming a range officer with USPSA, why you might want to become a range officer with USPSA. If you decide to become a range officer, you know, what is the course of action that you're going to have to take? How do you go about doing it? What are you going to learn in the classes? Once you've completed the classes, you know, what is required of you in level 1 matches, level 2 matches, kind of a thing. And then, you know, after they're through with the basic range officer certification, they talk about what a CRO is, which is a chief range officer. You know, they talk about the requirements there. They talk about what is involved in getting your certification. As it turns out, there's like a live one-on-one course as well as a correspondence course, and then they talk about RM classes, or an RM certification, which is range master, I believe. And you know, they talk very little about range master. They talk a little bit more about chief range officer, but they talk most about range officer training. And I thought it was really interesting because I really want to become a USPSA range officer, and for the same reasons that these guys do. You know, they want to get more involved. You know, they're looking at sort of giving back to the sport, helping the sport itself, shooters, things like that. always get them mixed up. I think it's Steve who talks about wanting to do it a little bit for personal reasons, you know, to advance his shooting. If he knows everything that's in the range book, it's better for him, and I kind of see it the same way. So there is a little bit of selfishness in why I want to do it as well. But I thought it was a really good primer in giving me a general understanding of what actually happens with those range officer courses. Unfortunately, I've been looking and looking and looking, and there's nothing even close to me, nothing remotely close to me anytime soon. So it's not looking like I'm going to be able to get my range officer certification this year. Hopefully one of the 2 clubs that I shoot at will have one next year. If not, I guess I'll have to venture all the way out into the dreaded New Jersey and pick up my certification there. But I really want to avoid driving all the way out to Jersey 2 days in a row. It's, you know, it's a couple of hours away, and if I have to get a hotel room, that's just going to compound it and make it all that much more difficult and that much more of a hassle. And I don't know that I want to go through all of that hassle just to get a card that says I'm a range officer and run shooters. I mean, it is important to me. I want to do more for the sport, but at the same time, anything that involves New Jersey is asking a lot. I don't like combining firearms in New Jersey, and I don't even like going to New Jersey anymore because it means I can't bring a gun, and you know, if there's just an empty case rolling around in my car, I could face jail time. You know, if I get pulled over and a cop sees it, it's not that bad. If I can't imagine an empty case would cause any problems, but you know, that's kind of the way I see New Jersey. It's really bad as far as guns are concerned, and I just don't want to go there. So that's kind of getting off on a tangent, but head over to the Power Factor Show and check out episode 80 of the episode 80 entitled The USPSA Range Officer Part 1. If you really enjoyed it, Part 2 has been posted, and you can roll right into it watching it on the same website, powerfactorshow.com. As I mentioned at the start of the segment, featured content was a little thin this week, and for the second piece, I wound up digging through some of the starred posts I have in Google Reader, stuff that looked interesting, but I didn't have time for, so I starred it, and usually I try to get back to it and look through it and pick out the stuff for the show, but over time, the stuff at the bottom kind of gets buried. So I was looking over some of the stuff that I had a little bit further down, and in early June, Everyday No Days Off posted a video from the gun store guys, or the gun gripes guys, and this one was entitled 5 handguns everyone should own. This is only half of the gun store guys. This is the younger guy. I think Barry is the older gentleman. I can't remember what this guy's name is, and I'm really bad with names, and I tend to mix them up if I remember them at all. But in this video, it's the younger guy talking about 5 handguns that everyone should own. And basically, he runs down a list, and he picks out a .22 caliber pistol, a .38 Special / .357 Magnum, so basically a revolver, a Glock 19, basically he discusses polymer semi-automatic pistols. He talks about 1911s, and then he talks about a pocket auto pistol, something like a Beretta Minx or Ruger LCP or a Diamondback, kind of those, that sort of gun, Smith & Wesson Bodyguard. And all in all, I thought it was interesting. I can't argue with any of his selections. You know, when he starts talking about a .22, really everyone should own a .22, even if all you're doing is just going to the range and just shooting odd things here and there, you know, tin cans or, you know, whatever, just going to the range and plinking. .22 is cheap. It's easy to shoot, and it's great for men, women, children. You know, it's just a good all-around gun that everyone can have fun with. You know, it's fun for the entire family kind of a gun, or sort of a class of gun. I like the idea of everyone should own a revolver of some sort. It's one thing I desperately need to add to my collection at some point. I have an old Rossi .38 Special. It's really nothing special, and you know, I would love to add a J-frame Smith & Wesson to it at to my collection at some point, but you know, I'm just having so much fun with semi-autos that I really haven't given much thought to spending, you know, the $400 or $500 on a revolver, which is kind of odd. You know, revolvers are kind of pricey for for a gun that is touted as so simplistic and easy to use and foolproof. Now, granted, it's not always easy to use and foolproof, but you know, when I look at a Glock in a case and a revolver in a case, like a Smith & Wesson Airweight, I really expect the Smith & Wesson to be cheaper because, you know, it's a revolver, it's simpler, there's less to it, or maybe not less to it. Glock has very few parts, but you get the idea. When you're looking at them side by side, you would think, oh, you know, the revolver would easily be the less expensive of the two options. But in a lot of cases, you know, revolvers are just as much, if not more expensive than some of the polymer semi-auto options. I mean, and I guess from a materials perspective, it would be, because, you know, a polymer gun, you know, the whole lower frame is plastic. You know, it's, what is it, injection molded, and, you know, it can probably be mass produced fairly cheaply, whereas a lot of the metal parts on the revolver, you know, there's probably more workmanship involved and things like that. But at any rate, you know, he talks about a revolver. He talks about the polymer semi-auto class, specifically the Glock 19 he likes. I don't own a Glock 19, however, I'm taking a real hard look at picking one up. I want to get out and handle a Generation 3 and a Generation 4 and see which one fits my hand better. I currently shoot a Glock 17 Generation 3 in USPSA. I'm really, really happy with it, but I'm hearing that the little bit smaller Gen 3 Glock 19 doesn't quite fit the hand as nicely as the 17. However, the Generation 4 is much more comfortable, so I want to get out and handle both and see which one is better, and then maybe make a purchase of one or the other. He talks about everyone should own a 1911. I don't own one. I really don't have a whole lot of desire to get one. It's not that I don't think they're really cool guns, and it's not that I don't like them. It's just they tend to be really expensive, you know, starting at $600 and going as high as the moon if you're looking at something custom. And, you know, many of which are chambered in 45 and more expensive to shoot. I'm not into reloading yet. I guess if I were to get into reloading, you know, 45 wouldn't be as big of an issue as it is right now with factory ammo and the cost hurdle. But I don't know, I'm very happy with 9mm and how it shoots and how I can shoot it, you know, in my current guns, you know, my Smith & Wesson M&P, my Glock 17, and you know, the only 1911 that really has any appeal to me right now is the 9mm 1911s, and from what I understand, they can be kind of problematic because the gun was designed for that, you know, that larger 45, and, you know, you get less recoil with the 9mm, so it doesn't function as reliably as it should, kind of a thing. I haven't researched it enough, but, you know, while I do like 1911s, it's kind of not on my radar right now as far as something to purchase. I really like the recommendation of a pocket pistol. He pulls out this tiny little Beretta Minx, which I've never seen before until he showed it on the camera. He pulled it out of his pocket. It didn't look like there was any sort of pocket holster in there, which was a little concerning, but I guess he knows what he's doing. You know, I like the class, but they are kind of difficult to shoot. You know, when you're dealing with a gun that small, you know, recoil can be a little bit more of an issue than with larger guns, but the biggest issue I have with them is that there's a very slim margin for error. You know, when you're shooting a big full-size gun, you've got a fairly long sight radius between the rear sight and the front sight. You know, there's a little bit of, I don't know, wiggle room in there. If you don't have the sights lined up exactly perfect, you can still get a pretty decent shot. When you shorten that sight radius and you go from having, you know, maybe 5 inches between the sights to a pocket pistol where you've got, you know, maybe 3.5 inches, you've got a significant reduction and you've got far less wiggle room. And if your sights are off a little bit, it could mean a major difference in impacting the target here or missing the target completely. So, you know, those little pocket pistols aren't for everyone, especially if you have a hard time with smaller sights. One of the reasons why I purchased the Smith & Wesson Bodyguard was because the sights were big and usable, and, you know, they were easy to acquire. Something like the Ruger LCP, I mean, they're little more than a bump on the slide. I mean, if you run your finger down, you can, it's like a little ridge on the slide. And I can only imagine in a stressful situation pushing that gun out and having a really hard time getting focused on the sights. Now, granted, something that small, a lot of people consider it a belly gun, just kind of point and shoot. You're only going to be shooting it from very, very short distances. You're probably never going to look at the sight anyway. But still, when I practice, I want to practice looking at the sights, and I've got to be able to see the sights to be able to practice with the sights. So again, not a class of gun that is for everyone. I guess just like all of these guns, they're not for everyone. One gun will suit you better than others, but I think of all of the classes listed, the pocket pistol is probably the most finicky as far as fitting a gun to a shooter, but that's just my take on it. So there is your featured content. Again, I've only got 2 this week, so let's get rolling into the cigar and drink pairing. We'll get the discussion topic done, and we'll get you on with your day, because wow, looking at the clock, I'm getting a very small window, so let's get rolling. Well, for the cigar and drink pairing this week, I have something pretty interesting, and actually the coffee is the most interesting part. The cigar that I'm smoking is the Perdomo Lot 23. It's made by Perdomo Cigars in Nicaragua, and this is a line of cigars that was really interesting to me at one point in time, but it's been overshadowed by the Reserve line. At one point in time, the price structure of Perdomo Cigars put the Lot 23 at sort of the basement. Well, it wasn't really the basement of Perdomo pricing, but as far as their premiums were concerned, there was the entry-level Lot 23 at like $4 and some change, and then there was the Reserve line, which it was between $6 and $7, and there was lots of variety in that Reserve line. And for the price, I thought that the Lot 23 was a really good cigar, and it was hard to pass up for that kind of money over the larger step of the Reserve line. Well, over time, the Reserve line came down in price, and they were getting much closer. Now it was a tougher decision to go with the Lot 23 or the Reserve line. And then all of a sudden, there was the federal tax introduced to cigars, S-chip. It was a 40-cent maximum tax to each individual cigar. So across the board, cigars jumped up 40 cents per single. Well, what Perdomo did, which I thought was great, was they decided to absorb the tax. So rather than pass the tax on to the consumer, they were just going to absorb it and absorb it into the cost of their cigars. So Perdomo cigars didn't rise with the rest of the cigar industry, and it seemed like it was a fantastic choice for them, because I think Perdomo sales boomed after that. But when that happened, you got to a point where all of the other cigars in the market were going up. The Lot 23 was this expensive, and the Reserve line was just a little bit more expensive. And at that point, it was, it'd be crazy if I just didn't buy the more expensive Reserve line. It's a little better, and it's marginally more expensive. So the Lot 23 just kind of fell off my radar until the Maduro was released. The Maduro I like quite a bit. This is a natural, and I pick them up every now and again, and they're an okay cigar. The natural, that is. They irritate my throat just a little bit. They're medium flavored, medium bodied. It's got sort of a leathery taste to it. Just a decent middle-of-the-road kind of a cigar. It's not as good as the Reserve line, but it's kind of what was laying on top of my humidor, and I just grabbed it and ran with it this episode. So, if you're interested in trying Perdomo cigars in general, contact my preferred retailer, which is Mike over at Buckhead Cigars. His phone number is 404-844-0400. He also has a website. It's askthecigarguys.com. It's not a retail site. It's just a listing of some of the newer product that might carry, some of the featured product. It's a listing of box and 5-pack pricing. Shipping is included in all those prices. Once you decide what you want, pick up the phone, give Mike a call, put your order in. If you would like to get a feel for him and his business, you can do so on Twitter, Facebook, and Google+, through Buckhead Cigar. Twitter, it's at Buckhead Cigar. Facebook, it's Buckhead Cigar. Google+, Buckhead Cigar. You kind of get the gist of where this is going. So, not only would you be supporting a fellow cigar guy, but also a big gun nut as well. So I left out the coffee portion of that whole thing. It's because actually I wanted to talk a little bit more about the coffee than I was going to about the cigars, which is opposite of usual. The coffee that I'm drinking this time around is Second Amendment coffee. I talked about ordering some last week, and it came in, and I've been drinking a little bit, not as much as I would like. It's not so easy to drink in my Keurig. It's actually kind of a headache. I guess we can talk about that. Generally, when I buy premium coffee, I buy it whole bean and then I grind it myself. But that was long ago when I was using a drip coffee maker. It would just grind up so many beans, put it in the coffee maker, and make my coffee. As simple as that. Or if I was feeling, I don't know, fancy, I would get out the French press and make coffee that way. But ever since my wife and I got a Keurig, the convenience has kind of taken over, and we just buy K-cups. It's easy. The machine heats up, you stick the cup in there, close the lid, hit the button, and you're good to go. And purchasing premium coffee kind of fell off my radar because it just seems like a massive hassle to create your own K-cup, which is fairly simple. I mean, it's like a plastic housing. You turn the lid off. There's a little screen in there. You put the coffee in, put the lid on, put it back in the machine, hit the button. But when I was buying premium coffee, I was buying whole beans. So the thought of buying whole bean and then putting, maybe half a dozen coffee beans in the grinder and grinding them up for a single cup of coffee just seemed like a lot of work for a cup of coffee. And I was just happy enough with the K-cups, so I stopped buying premium coffee. So because I'm doing, the cigar and drink pairings, I wanted to talk, I wanted to get more involved with, some of the better coffee out there. So I was introduced to Second Amendment coffee. I don't quite remember how I came across it. I think it may have been on Twitter. And I decided I wanted to put an order in. So I started looking at the options available. I bought medium roast, and I bought it ground so that it would save me that one step. So now when I build my own K-cup, I just scoop out the coffee and dump it in the K-cup. But the problem is, I don't know whether the coffee is too finely ground or my filter is too fine, because when I put so much coffee into the cup and then turn the machine on, all of the coffee is being flushed out into the screen sides of the K-cup, and then I'm getting sort of a fountain effect. You get the usual coffee that comes out of the bottom, and then I guess too much pressure builds up in the plastic housing and it overflows. So I've got the stream of coffee down the middle out of the coffee maker, and then I have this fountain effect out around the stream of coffee, which is just looks like clean water. So it's kind of a hassle, and I've been kind of fighting with it over the past couple of days. The other nice thing about the Keurig machine is that, or actually one of the downsides is that my machine only has two settings, small cup and big cup. And generally when I come down here to do the podcast, I'm filling up a travel mug. It's basically 2 large cups of coffee, and since I drink coffee slowly, it keeps it hot, and I find cold coffee repulsive, so it works out really well for me. So one of the things that my wife and I do is we buy the extra bold K-cups. Put the K-cup in the machine, close the lid, hit the button, fill 1 large cup of coffee, dump that cup of coffee into the travel mug because my travel mug's too tall to fit underneath, and then rebrew the same single K-cup, and then what was extra bold coffee becomes regular coffee. And it just kind of works out like that because K-cups are expensive. Excuse me. And I don't want to use 2 K-cups for 1 cup of coffee. So the frugal side of me comes out in that sense. And with the Second Amendment coffee, it's not as bold as those K-cups that I'm buying. So I have to make a K-cup. I get the fountain effect, the water everywhere. And then I have to break the machine down, clean out the K-cup, put fresh coffee in it, put it back in the machine, brew a second cup with the fountain effect, the water coming out, and then fills my travel mug. It really is good coffee. I'm enjoying it. It's got a nice medium body to it. Personally, I like a fuller bodied cup of coffee. I could probably achieve that effect if I put more coffee into the K-cup. However, because I'm getting that fountain effect, I think it's because there's too much pressure inside the cup. More coffee is just going to mean more pressure and more water spraying around. So I've got to figure out a way to do this. Maybe the simple solution is just to make just to get out the French press, although the coffee may be too finely ground for that, or either that or dust off the old drip coffee machine and use 2 of them, which I really don't want to do. So I've got to figure out a way to more easily make Second Amendment coffee. But the coffee itself is good. I'm enjoying it. It was a little pricey. I think it was like 14 something plus $6 to ship it, which, I mean, good coffee, quality coffee is a little more expensive. However, $20 for a pound of coffee seemed a little high, personally. The method of purchase isn't ideal either. He's got an eBay store set up. It's not an auction setup. It is, buy it now store setup. So, you're making your purchases through eBay, and then you're paying through PayPal. So, in a sense, you can see why the price has crept up a little bit, because he's paying fees to eBay for, the eBay stores and listing items. I would imagine he is. I don't know how how that whole store marketplace works. He's probably paying fees to PayPal for managing the transaction and things like that. And ultimately, the price trickles up a little bit because of all those services. So the method of purchase isn't ideal. And actually, when I made the purchase, I made it because I haven't used PayPal to purchase anything in such a long time. My old address was in there. The coffee went to my parents' house. I had to go drive to my parents' house to get the coffee. But the coffee itself is good. The method could have been a little better as far as purchasing it goes. But I'm really happy with the overall product. There was, the most important thing, 1% of sales will be donated to the NRA to defend your Second Amendment rights. So it's not just a bag of coffee with a picture of a gun on it. Percentage of sales actually goes to a Second Amendment organization to better your rights or to fight for your rights. And I really like that about the coffee as well. So I like it. I need to find a way to make it a bit bolder. I need to find a better way to use it in my Keurig machine. Maybe the best way is to go out looking for a My K-Cup filter that's a little coarser, to allow more water flow or something. But all in all, I'm really happy with it. Head over to facebook.com/Second Amendment Coffee if you'd like to look into purchasing some of your own. For the featured discussion portion of the show this week, I want to tell you a little bit of a story and then highlight some advice that I've learned along the way. And I don't know, maybe this will blossom into a discussion topic at some point. So, about Friday last week, I decided that I was going to shoot a USPSA match at Lower Providence Rod and Gun Club. It's a club that I shoot fairly regularly, once a month usually, and I really enjoy it. The club itself is it's set up in such a way where it's almost as if they dug a giant pit in the ground, so that the actual pistol bays were below grade, and you get fairly large side berms all the way around, because there's a thriving community around the gun club. They had to take extra precautions to make sure a round didn't leave the range. So imagine this setup. You've got this giant hole dug into the ground. You've got your pistol bays along the back, what would theoretically be the back wall. In between each of those bays is a big concrete divider, so that you can walk down range while someone in the next bay is shooting, and the bullet's not going to pass through that big concrete divider. There's 5 of those. Then sort of in the rest of the area is filled in with gravel, and there's a large storage shed and some other things going on. Well, in this big pistol area, which is great for practical shooting, because of the layout, and it's a safe range, it's a fun range. The only problem is there are no trees sprinkled out throughout the range. The only shade you get is when the sun is low in the sky and behind that big berm that's at the back of the range. It's the only time you get any sort of shade. Well, it makes the range really hot. There's no place to hide and avoid the heat in the middle of the summer. The other issue with the range, fortunately, they just put all this gravel down. Prior to laying all the gravel, it was just dirt and grass, and it's that sandy sort of clay. So any sort of rough movement on it would spur up a little dust. and especially shooting, you know, when your bullet passes through the target and impacts the back berm, there's a puff of dirt, you know, that soft, sandy, sort of powdery dirt goes up into the air. When you get a lot of people shooting, a lot of the dust starts flying around. It's been referred to as the Dust Bowl a couple of times, because in the summer, you know, it might get kind of still in there, and it's hot, and the dust is flying around, and it gets to be pretty nasty. Well, I usually shoot with 3 other guys. Because of the weather, the 3 guys that I normally shoot with decided that they weren't going to go. On Friday, I talked to the guys. I found out, oh, it's just me going. I asked around on Facebook. Turns out a couple of the other guys that I see on occasion were going. So I was going to go. You know, heat be damned. I was going to go, and I was going to shoot, and I was going to have a good time. I was going to make the best of it. The only decision was, do I want to wake up early and go help set up, or do I want to minimize my time spent in the heat and just go down there at regular registration time and sign up? Knowing that there was a major match being held the day after, and it was going to be really hot, I figured that volunteers were going to be kind of thin this month. So I set my alarm for 4:30. I got up. I left the house at 6 a.m. When I got in my car, the temperature readout was 77 degrees outside. Not terrible, but kind of warm for that time of day. So I drive down to the range. About 7 o'clock I get there. I start helping set up. And when I get to the range, I think the temperature readout was like 81 degrees, something like that. I get out of the car, I help with setup. By 9:30 registration closes, I'm getting ready to shoot, I'm getting my gear on, and I'm soaked. My shirt is soaked through, I'm hot, I'm sweaty. The day before, I went out and I purchased a boonie hat. It kind of looks like the hat from Gilligan's Island, except for it's tan, it's got a big floppy brim all the way around it. The objective was to protect my face and the back of my neck from the sun so that I didn't cook. And it worked out fairly well. So, you know, I'm wearing this big floppy boonie hat, which, you know, 10 years ago you wouldn't have caught me dead wearing this thing. These days, as I'm settling into almost 30, I'm less concerned about my appearance at the range, and I'm more concerned about practicality. So I'm wearing this big floppy boonie hat. My shirt is a nice dark green custom gun finishes t-shirt. I opted to go with a t-shirt because it was a little bit lighter than the usual team shirt, which is a polo, and it's a little heavier material. And a pair of shorts, and I've got tons of sunblock on. I've got this thick stuff on my face, on the back of my neck, my arms and legs. I've got this aerosol stuff that I've sprayed a nice heavy coating on. By the time setup was done and we were getting ready to shoot, I applied a second coat of sunscreen because it was getting hot. The sun was rising in the sky. There was less shade. Fortunately, the range had set up those easy up canopies. They're basically like an 8x8 canopy on feet, so all the shooters can kind of huddle in one spot and get out of the sun for a few minutes, you know, between pasting and shooting and stuff. So that kind of worked out well, but I was there to shoot and I was pushing hard. I was running maximum speed on every single stage. It was hot, it was humid, and I was out of breath and just sweat streaming off of me after every stage I shot. In retrospect, I really should have held off a little bit. There was no need to go maximum warp on these stages, but I was having fun. I came to shoot, I came to do the best I could, and I'm working on shooting stages faster and faster. Not so much the actual shooting part, but the moving from point A to point B is one of the parts of shooting that I really need to work on. I'm kind of slow transitioning, so this time around I was really pushing. I was hustling, and as a result, it was getting really hot. I was sweating a lot, and again, at the end of the stage, every stage I was out of breath. So, you know, I'm shooting like this for a couple of hours. We shoot the first, second, and third stage, which was actually stages 3, 4, and 5. By the time we rolled around to shoot stage 1, I was running out of gas. I didn't have a whole lot of energy left. I was feeling run down. I was feeling hot. I had consumed a large liter bottle of water during setup. I brought 2 big bottles of Gatorade with me that I assumed would be enough to carry me throughout the day. I consumed both of those. Fortunately, the club thought ahead and put water out for the people shooting. So I had one of the club's Gatorades and 3 bottles of water up until this point. I'm hot, I'm sweaty, and now all of a sudden I'm starting to get mild chills. And, you know, in this kind of heat, chills are probably not a good thing. So I'm trying to back off a little bit, but at the same time, I still want to push and do the best that I can throughout these stages. We shoot stage 1, and then we hit stage 2, which was the last stage of the day, and I was out of gas. I didn't have much left. I shot the stage as quickly as I could manage, and then I just sort of scurried off and hid underneath the canopy, absorbing up the shade. I grabbed the 4th bottle of water out of the cooler. I drank half of it. I poured the other half inside my boonie hat and stuck it back on my head, which seemed to help a little bit. And I wasn't a whole lot of help in taping and pasting and resetting that particular stage, because I was a little concerned about how hot I was. But I kind of sucked it up after the last shooter was done. Fortunately, squads are really small. We had 6 in our squad. So when we were finished shooting, it was time to break down. Everyone usually lends a hand, breaks down the stage, and then you leave. It's a volunteer sport, and that's just kind of what you do. So I sucked it up. I got out there in the heat, and I started helping break down the stage. The target stands were so hot that I couldn't touch them with my bare hands, and I left them for someone with gloves to get. Really, they were uncomfortable to touch, so I just kind of left them lay. I started pulling down the barrels. I got them out of the way. I was helping with getting the walls broken down and put away. And then once we got everything stacked so that the machine could come over and volunteers could load it on the machine and the machine could put the stuff away, once everything was sorted down and sort of stacked, I called it a day. I grabbed one more bottle of water. Excuse me. I bid my farewells, and I climbed in my car, turned the air conditioner up all the way, and just kind of sat there and relaxed for a minute. I glanced down at the temperature readout in my car again, and it went from 77 degrees at 6 a.m. to 109 degrees at 1 p.m. And I was beaten. I couldn't shoot another stage even if I wanted to. So I relaxed for a minute or two, and then I made the long drive home. You know, mild headache throughout the way. And, you know, when I came home, you know, plenty more fluids, relaxed, and, you know, recovered. Late the following day, I started feeling better. I would imagine I was severely dehydrated, but, you know, along the way, I learned a couple of things as far as shooting in high heat is concerned, and I thought I would share those high heat tips with you. The first is apply plenty of sunscreen. Bring plenty of sunscreen. I wound up putting 3 coats of sunscreen on me throughout the day. At one point in time, I reapplied sunscreen at the beginning of the last stage of the day, and the stuff was sort of like floating on the sweat that was rolling off my arms, so I had to wipe myself down, which was nasty and kind of grimy from all the dust in the air. So I wiped myself down. I reapplied sunscreen to my arms, legs, face. Excuse me. And I didn't burn, which is amazing. I'm fairly pasty and I burn really easy, but all of those coats of sunscreen seem to do a wonderful job. I feel great. No, it's amazing. I was in the sun all day and I have not a single bit of sunburn. That's awesome. Another thing you may want to do is get yourself a large brim hat. A lot of people shoot in baseball caps, which are fine. I don't, but it leaves a lot of the back of your neck exposed, and a lot of times when I shoot, that's one place that burns the worst. I'll remember to get plenty of sunscreen on my face, but sometimes I won't get enough on my neck, and I'll get roasted. That large brim hat kept me cool in a couple of ways. For one, it kept the sun from beating on my face. It prevented sunburn on the back of my neck, and it worked really well when I doused it with water and put it on my head. That was a plus that I wasn't anticipating. The hat cost me $10 at Tractor Supply. It wasn't easy to find. I hit up a couple of local sporting goods stores with no luck. I thought I was going to have to drive up to Cabela's, but on a whim, I was talking on Twitter, and Tractor Supply just happened to pop into my mind, and I bought one for $10. Something with a larger brim probably would have worked out better, like a cowboy-style hat. I really don't care what I look like when I go shooting, so I can't pull off a cowboy hat normally. I can't pull off a floppy boonie hat, but for the case of shooting, I did it anyway. But that large brim hat definitely helped. The other obvious one is hydration. get a general idea of how much water you think you're going to consume, or fluids, whether it be water, Powerade, Gatorade, you know, whatever the case may be, and double it. You're better off taking a bunch of stuff to the range with you and only consuming a portion of it and bringing that stuff back home, rather than getting to the range, running out of fluids halfway through the day, and then wondering, okay, well, it's 109 degrees. There's very little shade. What am I going to do now? Pack plenty of water, and don't be afraid to have to bring it home. You know, bring extra if that's what it takes. I'm really lucky that the club had plenty of water on hand, because I definitely would have run out long before the halfway point, or long before the match was finished. I would have been out of fluid, and I probably would have been in worse shape. And finally, you probably should think about how hard you're pushing when you go shooting in those sorts of temperatures. I was going full bore. It was a bad idea. I should have held back a little bit. I came in second place overall in production division, which was great. The high C shooter, which was great, but I probably could have backed it off a little bit and still done very well. And had I backed off and shot at a little more comfortable pace and moved around at a little more comfortable pace, I probably could have lasted another stage or two, or maybe even 3. But the way I was pushing myself, when we hit stage 5, I was done. Actually, when we hit stage 2, I was done. When we hit stage 1, I was on empty, or running on fumes at that point. So if you're going to be spending a lot of time in the heat, keep endurance in mind. Don't push yourself. Don't use up all that energy early on, because if you're planning on a long day, you need to be able to span that entire day. Lots of fluid, lots of sunscreen. Bring your own shade if you have to, if you're shooting at a range with no shade. A lot of guys, I shouldn't say a lot of guys, a handful of guys are walking around with big colorful umbrellas over their shoulder. It worked for them, kept them out of the sun, and they seem to be doing really well throughout the day. They carried their own shade with them, and they didn't have to huddle underneath that tiny little canopy with a handful of other shooters. So there is just a handful of tips for shooting in the heat. If you've got some of your own to add, please feel free to get in touch with me, share them with me, hit up the comments section on YouTube, my blog, Gun Rights Radio Network, so on and so forth. Just looking at the clock, I'm over schedule, so the closing for this show is going to be mixed in with this portion. So again, I want to thank you for, or I shouldn't say again, I want to thank you right now for listening to, watching, downloading, subscribing to episode 47 of Shooting the Breeze, the formal gun podcast of waltinpa.com. If I've said something of interest and you want to get in touch with me, easiest way is to head over to waltinpa.com, click the contact button. There's a form there for emailing me. There's also some information for social media outlets. That's sort of your one-stop shop for contacting me. I'm also on the Gun Rights Radio Network forum. I have a Shooting the Breeze section where I post a new episode I post a new topic for each episode. So please feel free to comment in there if you so choose. And I think that's going to do it. So again, thanks for checking out Shooting the Breeze, the formal gun podcast of waltinpa.com, and I will catch you next time.
You can hear Gun Rights Radio Network on Stitcher Smart Radio. Stitcher allows you to listen to your favorite shows directly from your iPhone, Android phone, BlackBerry, or Palm phones, on demand and on the go. Don't have Stitcher? Download it for free today at Stitcher.com or in the app stores. Stitcher Smart Radio, the smarter way to listen to radio. Gun Rights Radio Network shows can be found under Sources.